Oh, hello there. Yes, I just thought today, in my ongoing war on grifters, you know what I mean, that we'd have a little look at Emma Webb, who's filling in for everyone's least favourite cosplay vicar, Calvin Robinson. And, I don't know, for a Sunday, it's one of the biggest, most steaming piles of utter drivel I've heard for a long period of time. So let's dive in and unpack what she's got to say.
It can be hard being a Christian in modern Britain. Week after week on this show, we see cases of Christians compelled to speak against their consciences, or censored for expressing their faith. We've seen a vicar debanked and Christians prosecuted for the thought crime of praying, not out loud, but in their own heads because of new censorship zones around abortion facilities that criminalise silent, private prayer. Christians across the globe face often violent persecution, but are met with deathly silence here in the West.
Okay, just to dive in there. Yes, this show, The Common Sense Crusade, with Calvin, was effectively set up because it neatly ties in to American evangelical concerns. So this gives the GBNews the ability to present itself in the States as being one of them. On just a blunt level, that's what you're going to get. Now then, she cites one particular vicar who we're not quite sure about the story, because his story is he just sent a very innocent email, which we've not seen, and was then debanked, to use a ferocious term, one might say, but we don't actually know whether that's true. It strikes me as really strange that somebody who merely innocently, yet another innocent Christian who innocently sends something somewhere that we can't see, who's immediately pounced upon. And we also get, of course, the whole lie, and it's a lie, Ninth Commandment stuff, Emma, about people praying outside abortion clinics. It's harassment, which is why it's been made illegal. Simple harassment of individuals who deserve the dignity to be left alone from prying eyes. And in terms of Christians everywhere being persecuted, GBNews is silent about Christians being persecuted by Israeli authorities in various occupied territories. Silent on that, aren't you, Emma? Anyway, let's move on.
That said, Christ did tell his followers in Matthew 10, "You will be hated by all for my name's sake." In Matthew 5, that men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil things against you falsely. Or in Luke, that men shall hate you and shall separate you from their company. The Church of England's leadership seems to be running arms open wide to embrace any and all fashionable ideas and ideologies with no consideration for preserving their own inheritance, the truth, or protecting traditional believers. In fact, under their leadership, it's seeming less and less like a church at all. As Reverend Daniel French pointed out yesterday on Twitter, the church advertised themselves like a quasi-undertakers talking about last goodbyes instead of the life eternal and the resurrection of the dead. French calls it theological nonsense, but that seems to be the modus operandi of whoever is doing their PR.
Okay, just to, again, jump in there. Yes, I'm a lot of decades old, and I've heard this refrain about the church for as long as I've been alive, and I'm willing to bet that it goes back several hundred years, that the church isn't what it was. It's the standard viewpoint of somebody who doesn't remember that things change, or indeed that simply your viewpoint of the world as a child is going to be different from your viewpoint of the world as an adult. That may or may not be a dig at Emma, I'm not really quite sure. Probably is. But that kind of right-wing view that somehow because you were 7 in 1950 the world was perfect. It wasn't. The church has to react to doing a great many functions amongst non-believers. Think about marriage, think about funerals, and you can decry the language that's used, but the audience isn't Christian. This is part of the problem. We are rapidly becoming an incredibly secular society. The people that do go to church are people that GB News isn't particularly keen on. Yeah, you get an awful lot of very, very religious people in the UK. They tend to be black evangelicals from that kind of Afro-Caribbean or African background. And they also tend to be very Orthodox Muslims, or indeed Orthodox Jews. But GB News' audience isn't composed of those people, so we have to pretend magically that the indigenous white population, if I can use that phrase, magically are all quietly Christian. And survey after survey after survey after survey says that they're not. Anyway, let's move on.
A brief segue. Let's take a look at news from Winchester this week, from that great ancient cathedral city. The old minster there was erected in 648 AD. Alfred the Great named it the capital of the ancient kingdom of Wessex, and in many ways it could be said to be the birthplace of England, born of Alfred's imagination and resolve. But it's 2023, and this week it was reported that the Lib Dem-run Winchester City Council has imposed a 710% hike on Sunday parking charges, all part of reaching net zero. Fees for Sunday, now for 4 hours, have risen from £2 to £17. Air quality doesn't care which day of the week it is, they said. Some are concerned that the elderly won't be able to afford to pray. One gentleman compared it to the Soviet Politburo, saying they implement any scheme they wish and appear accountable to nobody.
Okay, just to dive in there. Yes, so we're talking about Christians, are we, Emma? No, suddenly we've sidestepped into Lib Dems and net zero, which is flavour of the month because the Tories managed to scrape through a recent by-election in Outer a big political thing. Emma is now talking about a Lib Dem council. Not the church, the Lib Dem council. She'll go on to talk about the church, but think about this. Oh, it's just like the Politburo, isn't it? Said a gentleman. Who? Representative of whom, Emma? Yeah? Nobody. Yes, we all hate parking charges going up. In particular, we hate parking charges at hospitals, for example. Is that a Christian thing? I don't think it is. You know? I don't know. What she's done here, basically, is brought in the usual right-wing cant to make it a story about Christianity. It isn't a story about Christianity. It just happens that they're doing so in a place with a cathedral. Let's move on.
Winchester Cathedral so far hasn't commented, but I think it's fair to say that Winchester City Council will find plenty of allies among the bishops. Not too long ago, Synod discussed the potential of human composting, as disgusting as that sounds.
Right, just again to dive in there, yes. Now, the church hasn't commented, but Emma knows what they think without asking them. I believe that a church spokesman said, no, we're fine with this. It's a bit like Emma Webb's gentleman, isn't it? Human composting. Come on then, Emma, tell us what that is. Sounds like burying somebody, doesn't it? Yeah, and we wouldn't want the church to be involved in burying people, or would we? I'm confused, Emma. I'm confused. Just like you are, but nevertheless, I guess to the faint-minded it sounds sensible. Let's move on.
As a low-carbon alternative to burial and cremation. Extinction Rebellion, who we've seen parading through Bristol Cathedral, seem to be more welcome than traditionally minded Christians. Like Coutts Bank, who recently debanked Nigel Farage, the Church of England are signed up to the UN's principles for responsible investment. And the church, the church commissioners, like Coutts, who handle the church's investment portfolio, are, to quote their website, committed to incorporating environmental, social and governance issues into our approach to investment. That is ESG. Now,
Okay, yes, let's just dive in there, shall we? Because once again, Emma has dragged in loads of things which realistically aren't a lot to do with presumably whatever parking charges she was mentioning or something. Right, okay, yes, Extinction Rebellion seem to be more welcome if we show a clip of them. But if we go to the church today, the cathedral today, there won't be any people in Bristol dressed in red in Bristol Cathedral. Will it seem like it's just simply full of traditional Christians? I guess it will seem that way, won't it? Yes. And in terms of ethical investment, you would damn well hope that the church would ethically invest. Yeah? I don't really think that the majority of actual Christians, Emma, and I'm not realistically thinking you're one, but leaving that aside, a gentleman told me that, by the way, but leaving that aside, I don't really think that the average Christian in the UK would particularly want the church to invest in BAE missiles, would it? Let's move on.
we'll come back to this a little bit later in the show, but for now, that E seems to be widely understood as anything to do with reaching net zero, while the S has everything to do with implementing equality, diversity and inclusion policies, understood through the filter of critical race theory, or as has come to be known outside of academia, wokeness. In Matthew 6...
Right, okay, and again, yes, let's just drag everything we can that you're being trained to dislike. Yes, critical race theory, not a thing in this country. Wokeness, can't really describe it, but let's just throw everything we can because we're not actually getting our own way. It's a kind of mild-mannered throwing your toys out the pram attitude, whereby you'll start sobbing about something that happened 5 years ago that you haven't quite let go. And just to finish up,
6, Christ says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. I am beginning to wonder whether the Church of England is struggling with its allegiance. Either it can choose the dominant political philosophy of the day and all that entails, or it can have the gospel and defend the faith. But it can't have both.
Right, okay then. Yes, and we finish with a false dichotomy, yeah? The classic right-wing view on everything, yes? Oh, we need to bring back the death penalty, otherwise the terrorists have won. Are you sure about that? Yes, it's an absolute. We can't change the Metropolitan Police because of a few bad apples. Oh, right, okay, so we've got to put up with the bad apples then, yeah? It's such meaningless, shallow thinking. And what this is designed to do, of course, is to get the church, that official branch of the government, to play their game. And this is bullying. On a blunt level, this is a kind of bullying tactic that these billionaire owners, multi-millionaire owners, in particular case of GBNews, use their platforms for. You're going to shut up so that we can dominate in what we say. And I'm sure that, from my limited knowledge of Scripture, that's exactly what Jesus was want. Absolutely. I mean, that's what he was all about, wasn't he? Yeah? And once again, I will remind Emma of the 9th commandment, because I don't honestly believe that anyone on that show actually believes this stuff in the slightest. And in terms of serving masters, they are serving a particular version of American evangelical liberalism, yeah? Libertarianism at its absolute worst. Anyway, do enjoy church today. Have a lovely time.